Good afternoon, everyone. How are you? Can I just check that you can hear me and see me? There's a good few of you online already. Hello, Andrea. Loud and clear. Oh, brilliant. Thank you, Connie. Perfect. Perfect, perfect. Okay, let's scroll back up to the top. Let's see who's here. We've got Jill. Hello, Jill. I'm not sure if I recognise your name. Jill, are you new to us? Or new to me this afternoon? We have Connie, of course. Lovely to have you here again, Connie. And we have Margaret and Donna. Hi, Donna. Hi, Valerie. We have Kathy. We have Helen. Hello, Helen. How's you? Oh, and we've got Grandma Bonnie too. Hello there. How are you? You can hear me as well. Perfect. Okay, we've got a good few of us here. So, we have Diana. Good morning. Or good afternoon here, actually. Where are you, Diana? If it's obviously morning where you are. It's lovely to have you here. You're joining us on YouTube, which is lovely. Let's just wait to see who else we've got coming in as well. Just for another few moments. How are you, Helen? Are you okay? I had the telly on this morning and it seems like there's sun down sort of your way, or definitely in Cornwall. Have you got any sun this morning? I hope you have. Makes life a lot better for us all if we have a bit of sun, doesn't it? Okay, so thanks for joining me this afternoon. These are the cards I'm making today. I thought I'd use the Feathered Friends collection. I haven't used it in a little while. I think probably the last time I used it was to make Christmas type cards. So I thought I'd pull it out of the pile today, and I've created something a little bit different. So I said on my Facebook thing that we will be making 2 cards, and it's 2 cards mainly because, to be honest, I couldn't decide which background to use, so I thought let's use 2. So if I just move one of them out of the way, you can see just how well these cards really stand alone by themselves. If you're familiar with the collection, you'll know that this is the die, and it's a single die or a single collection. So you stencil both birds together on this lovely sort of U-shaped bough. But what I've done, I've separated them. And if I just bring that second one in again, and if you just look at those cards individually as that they are, you'd never know that they were actually paired with their little partner here. So I think it's just a really nice way to get more out of this set. Obviously, everything I'm going to show you today, all the techniques and stenciling, can be applied to the stencil as a whole. And if you wanted to make the stencil or the card with the 2 birds joined as they are in the original design, then obviously that's just as perfect as well. But as I say, the background for these, I couldn't actually decide on what I wanted to use. It was a choice of the blooming bows, which we have here. So it's a background embossing folder, but unusually, actually, Lisa's given us a set of layering stencils for this. Now there's only 2, but it makes a big difference. Normally this type of background would just be an embossing folder, wouldn't it? But no, we've got the stencil, so that elevates it even more. So I couldn't decide whether I wanted to use this one, which I hadn't used before, or, because these are my 2 newest purchases, or did I want to use the Lily of the Valley? Now again, we have the embossing folder, and it is a background embossing folder. It's 5 by 7, as are the bows. But again, Lisa's given us, and for this particular set, really detailed layering stencils. So I thought, why not use both and make 2 cards? So on top of those sets, also I've also used the nested essential stitched rectangles. I shall put up a little slide for this in a moment. And I've used the fonts I've used are my favourite ones. You can use whatever you think suits, of course, that's in your stash. So I've used the Fabulous fonts, which are a set of stamps and dies. And also I've used shadow words, which again are also stamps and dies. So that's everything I've used. So let me just pop up that slide for you. That's everything I've used, and I'll just show you these cards in a little bit more detail. Actually, what I think I'll do, I'll put these slides on at the end for you also. I'll just take that away, and what I might do, I'm getting to grips with how my camera's set up for you. So what I might do, I might just, instead of bringing the cards closer to the camera, I can zoom so it keeps it all in focus. So this one's quite straightforward. I've stenciled the bows into the background using the same colours as I've used on the bird, and I've used the nested rectangles, and I've 3D'd the frame so that sits in a nice little recess. And that looks black on screen, but it is actually Lisa's satin card, the blue satin card. So you can just about see it there, can't you? But it works so well with the blue that I've got on the bird there. This one, there's one or two ways. I don't know. You'll have to let me know what you think of this. I can't make up my mind. And I think once I've made the second card, I can have one of each. Because what I've done, I've got a vellum overlay on that. So we have the lily of the valley in the background there, which I've stenciled. But I didn't know if that was a little bit too busy as it was, and the colour was just a little bit too bold. I don't know. I think it sort of does work. And particularly if you put the sentiment on there as well, Happy Easter. Or you could even swap that and you can make a Happy Birthday. And maybe if you stamp that in black, then again that will have a whole different look also. But I thought I'd give it a try. I've just taken a piece of vellum, which is from the Modern Floral set, and I've embossed it with the Lily of the Valley embossing folder. And when I overlay that onto the stenciled Lily of the Valley, it takes on just a little hue. It takes away the brightness of the stenciling in the background. It gives us that little bit of pattern, but it just sort of pushes it into the background, which means that you really focus on the bird at the front. So I thought that was just a nice little attention to detail. Then, of course, you can put your sentiments on top of that. So they're the 2 cards today that I'm making, and unusually for me, I'm going really quite fantasy with the birds. I love birds, to be honest. Oh, it's a closer look for you there. Right, let's go the other way. There we are. Pan out again. There we are. You can see the colours that I'm using too. Leave those aside. Yeah, I went really fantasy. I just went with the colours that I thought looked good together and that made me happy. So I love watching the birds in the garden. I always feed them. I've had this sort of lifelong obsession with them. So normally when I do this sort of thing, I really like to stencil the birds to be true to nature. But yeah, I went a bit wild this time. See, I've got a whole array of colours, which again I shall put a slide up for you as well. There you go. They're the colours I used for these. So there's lots of swapping and changing and sort of lots of different stencil brushes going here, there and everywhere. But I think it's quite a good fun thing to stencil, particularly as you are separating them. So they're the colours I used. Also, what I do need to just mention quickly is Lisa's pick of the week, which is on the front page of the website, which is thatcraftplace.co.uk. It's actually a fabulous deal on the magnetic mat this week. It's the magnetic mat, which fits into both Ultimate tools, to be fair, but it's specifically designed for the Ulti-mate 2, which doesn't have the magnetic platform built into it. So this makes it a game changer. The Ulti-mate 2 a game changer, because obviously it turns it into a magnetic platform, which along with the deal you get 2 magnets free, 2 bar magnets, and these are my original magnets actually. Sort of touch wood off to the side here. You know, I've managed to keep them intact. I've wrapped them in washi tape, which with a little tab on them, which makes it easy for me to pick them up on and off the mat, because I don't have any nails to pick them up. So that makes them easier. So it does mean that you can hold any of your projects on the mat, and it keeps it, as you can see there, it keeps your cardstock in place. Now we do have the tacky mat for it also, but bear in mind that this is portable. You don't have to use it for the Ulti-mate. If you just want to use it as is and do your stamping like this, it makes a nice platform. You know, it can be used completely independent of the tool. You would have seen Dawn use it on, what day are we? Monday, yesterday. See, I told you I didn't know what day of the week it was. Yeah, so it's really useful just to keep everything in place. And also, there's it makes it really nice to line up when you stamp something, or if you want to line up your stencils on your, if you want to line up the dies on your stenciled image, it sort of holds it all in place, and there's no chance that it will get knocked out of position. So that's the deal that's going on there. So as always, that runs from first thing Monday morning through to midnight on Sunday. So if actually also you're in the market to actually get some new magnets as well, it might be a good opportunity to just stock up on your magnets also. So where are we? Let's get stenciling, because I've got quite a lot of stenciling to do. I'm just thinking, what else was there for me to tell you? It will come to me, I think. As I say, apologies for the late notification on Facebook about today's live. As I say, I had a weekend away. My son had a competition up in Dublin, a climbing competition up in Dublin, so we decided to have a day out in Dublin after that as well. We'd never been before, so yeah, he's sort of thrown the week out. But it's all good fun, and I'm here with you now. So we're going to get stenciling. We're going to stencil the birds first, our feathered friends. And I shall just bring in my stencil so you can see where we're going with it. So let's see if I can, I'll just pop that somewhere there. Okay, I'll try not to cover that up. So when I first started stenciling this, I knew that I was going to separate them. So therefore I worked with the colours knowing that the birds were going to be separated. So, I mean, you could stencil this twice over and first time stencil it with both birds the same colourways if you didn't want to swap and change too many colours on each layer of the stencil, and then the second time you stencil it, you could stencil in another colourway, and then you have sort of 2 sets of birds to play with. Or you can do it this way and yeah, change and swap the colours as you go. So it shouldn't get too confusing. It worked out quite well. So my initial thoughts were start off with the Pina Colada. Let's see, can we pan out a little bit more? Nope, sorry, going the wrong way. I'll put the colours up again afterwards, or perhaps if I just put that down there, you might just be able to see them tipping into the top of the, there you go, into the top of the screen there. So I'm going to start off with the Pina Colada on the left-hand bird there, and I'm going to get myself a piece of copy paper, And I'm just going to just mask off that second bird there, just for now. So we're going to Pina Colada. This is just a base initially, and this is why I'm going to start with the stencil brush. So I'm going quite heavy because, say, we want that to, well, we're going heavy but not too heavy. We're not going overly yellow on that, but I will bring in the stencil brush, and I'm just going to stencil off where the wing is here. So we're going to have a little bit more yellow just around this wing area and around where his face will be, like so. We're not coming right into the main body of the bird like that. And then I'm going to use the Dusky Rose. I think originally I used the Rhubarb jam, but I just want to go a little bit paler this time. So I'm going to use a Dusky Rose, and I'm going to come in just along this edge of the bird there. And although these are different colours, if you just keep working at this in nice circular motions, you'll end up getting a really nice sort of ombre effect blend going from one colour to the other. Then you'll see that where the pink meets the yellow, it will start going into like a real sort of peachy sort of colour. So I'm just going to do the pink just along the base there. So we've got that as a nice blend. And then I can just take that away, and I'm then going to start on the second bird here. So the base for this bird, I used painted eggshell. I'm just going to wipe that a little bit because we don't want too much of a contamination of those colours at this stage. So I'm just going to put a real light base of the painted eggshell onto this second bird here. And then I can start building that colour up. So now I'm going to come in with the turquoise, and all I'm going to do is just, again, just in certain areas along the, just under his wing and just where his tail would be, I'm just going to add that pop of colour there. And it's really lovely colour that blends into that painted eggshell. That painted eggshell actually can either be grey or it can take on a blue hue, depending on the colours that you're using it with. So again, I'm just coming into the wing and just adding a little bit of that natural turquoise, just to some shadow around the wing, like so. And then while I'm here, I'm going to use the Deep Ocean, and I'll give him a nice dark blue neck. I say him mainly, I think, because I'm using blue, so I'm stereotyping a little bit, but it's a good way to distinguish between the two, isn't it? So I'm going to give him a real nice blue nape there, and I'll just come down a little bit more. So I'm definitely stenciling a lot bolder than I would normally do, but this one is sort of giving me budgerigar type of colours. So I'm going to give them a real nice blue hue there. As I say, I'm just sort of making this up as I go along. And I'm just going to come back in with that natural turquoise and make that really deep at the base of where his wing would be, and just blend that into his back there. So that gives us a good base of the colours that these two feathered friends are going to be. So I'll take that away. You can see now we're taking that away, that they've blended so nicely. So this is where we start bringing in the background. What I want to do is use tree bark, because we're using a branch. Now you could use any other colour. There's a grey colour that Lisa's used on the stencil, but I'm just going to ground everything and use the tree bark brown. Now this can go really, really dark if you want to, or it can just stay really quite subtle, which is what I'm doing here. So just to get the coverage initially through all of these areas, I'm using the larger blending brush. Because we're keeping this all quite light and bright, we don't need to go too dark really with the brush or with the colour. And then I'm going to swap to a smaller stencil brush. Now I shall do the leaves in a second, but with the stencil brush I'm just going to pick out where the branch will be. Now we have a little loose bit here, which is, I'm just going to hold that in place with my finger. Now we've spoken before about the little delicate areas on these stencils. They really aren't a negative at all, but you do need to just be aware of them on particular stencils. If they weren't there, we wouldn't have the level of detailing, and you would definitely be missing something from the design. So just by holding it in place, it's really no issue at all. So I'm just picking out those branch areas on this side of the stencil. Now you notice here, because we have flowers around on this part of the bough and leaves around here, which again makes it perfect to separate the two birds because they've both got their individual identities. That was my thinking. So I've just stenciled the branch in there. So now I can come in with the Margerita and a smaller stencil brush and start getting that vibrant green into the leaf area, like so. Again, if you just wanted to keep it simple, it really wouldn't matter if you stenciled this whole area in green at all. I'm not worrying too much actually about getting a really nice blend on those leaves. I don't necessarily think you need to, and they're so small and sort of not necessarily the focal point of the design. I don't think it matters too much. So I'm just going to make sure I've got the green on there. There's Hazel. She's back from her holidays. Yeah, so you can see how that's really come about, and you can just see how the detailing works there with the brown and the leaves. I think it works really nicely. It's worth taking just that little bit of extra time for that detail. Now, here I'm going to use the rhubarb jam. So this is where we start introducing the blossom on this left-hand side. Really, really pretty. So I've picked up the stencil brush and I'm just using the ink that is on the brush and on the stencil at this stage, because I know that we have a couple of other layers coming up to complete the detailing on the blossom. And of course, the first layer you put down should be the lightest because you build the detail up on top of that. So it may look like you're not putting a huge amount of colour down, but obviously as you move on, you'll see the reason for that. But if I take that away, you've got the subtlety of the blossom building there. So it's looking pretty, isn't it? No, this would be a really great way also to experiment with different colours. Obviously, you can go with the birds that you see in the garden and use them as your colour inspiration, or you can just go wild and just do something completely different, which is what I'm doing today. So what I'm going to do now, I'm using the anthracite. So I didn't actually put this on the list. And I'm going to use anthracite just to give this wing a real dark background. Now, I'm not going to put any more colour on there, I don't think, at this stage. I'm just going to see what I've got on there. So you can see how I've added the colour, and I shall be adding on top of this. Now, for this bird, I want to keep the face white also. So what I'm just going to do, I'm just going to give one fairly firm swipe of the anthracite brush, which I know has got a tiny bit of ink in it, but that is just going to add just enough shadow into the cheek. So when I take that away, there's enough detail in there to sort of hint of it being a white face, but you haven't left it just white cardstock, if that makes sense. So what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to pick up a tiny bit more of the anthracite, just a really tiny bit. Put that on the stencil, and I'm just going to brush it into the top of the wing area. So the top of the wing, which will be where his back is also, is going to be the darkest area. I don't want it to overpower, as you can imagine. So if you take that away, you can see how well that's layered. So although it's anthracite, it's dark and it's a scary ink, it still looks quite in keeping. But what I am going to do now, just to sort of blend all that in, I shall come in with the rhubarb jam, quite a lot of ink, take the most of it off onto the stencil, and then start pushing that into the anthracite. So you have a pink wing with the undershadow from the anthracite. So it's a really nice way to use such a dark ink. And you don't have to worry about then slim black onto a pretty bird, because then if you stencil a colour over the top of that, that sort of negates the black. So you can see how now that's really blending in. Let me just, there we go. Bear with me. I should blend out again in a second. I just want you to see how those blends are happening, and say that the anthracite there really doesn't look too scary. And you can just see just that little shadow on the side of the face just hints that you do have a white face there. So it's sort of counterintuitive actually when you want to leave white areas. And I think I've done videos before where I stenciled white flowers but used a dark ink or a grey ink. So that's her sorted out. So now we come on to the other fellow friend. So I'm coming back in with the painted eggshell, and I'm just going to give his face a real pale blue background, like so. So I just take that away, and you can just see how, again, he's not having a white face, but I'm just keeping that really pale. The wing, we are going to be quite bold and come in with the deep ocean. This is a stunning colour. I don't use it enough, I really don't. So I'd say that was partly why I wanted to sort of go wild with the colours today, and I want that to be really, really dark. I'm leaving this area just a bit paler so we can blend in some of the natural turquoise in a second, but we want that to be quite bold, and that's a stunning colour. So now we can come in with the natural turquoise and be just as bold from this side and just fill in there. And because you left this little area a lot paler, it means that you can blend the two colours together quite straightforward, as you can see there. So we can take that away. And because you've used the same colours already on his back and on his underbelly here, that the wing really does sit nicely, and the colour grey works so well. So it's not too bad, is it, to be stenciling the two birds together? What you could actually do, if you wanted to concentrate on one bird first, you could just go through all the stencils, just stenciling the left-hand bird. Then you can go back to the beginning with all the stencils and then come back and stencil the second one, if you prefer to do it that way. It's say your preference really, and how you like to stencil. Right, we have the tail. So let me just remind myself, the tail I think always needs to be the same colour as the wing, personally. So I'm going to come back in with the anthracite, pick up a little bit more ink, because obviously the base of the tail is going to be a little bit more shadowing going on. So we can brush that into there. So we want the anthracite to be darker at the top here, using the same theory as we did when we done the wing. So that's all that we need on there. Then we can come back in with the rhubarb jam. And start adding that colour. There we are. So we can go quite dark, I think. I'll use that ink and just stencil over the anthracite, so it turns the black ink into a pinky hue, like so. And I think what will we do? We'll just add a little bit of the anthracite, the rhubarb jam at the top there also. Then we can do a similar sort of thing as we done to the wing on the bluebird here. So we come in with the deep ocean. We'll go really dark at the base. Now we do have an opening for the second wing here, and I'm just going to use the deep ocean straight across. So we're catching the base of the wing on the back, and we're catching the top of the tail also. So we're going to bring that blue a long way down into the tail. It's a really, really stunning blue, and it works so well with this natural turquoise. So what I'm actually going to do, I'm just going to wipe my stencil a little bit here. It's just a dry microfiber cloth actually. It works really well and it doesn't affect what you're stenciling. So now I'm going to come in with the natural turquoise into the base of the tail and work upwards. And if we go quite deep, we can eventually meet the blue and blend those seamlessly together, like so. And I think his wing's working very well there. We have an extra bit of the wing here, so I'm going to go quite heavy with the natural turquoise there. I'm just going to take that away and just see how everything's blending together. Can you see how that's all coming together? And you can see how it works with the wing and the tail being the same sort of colourway. It really sort of ties everything in. Okay, so I'm just going to make sure that I've used all areas of the stencil. Now we do have the legs there, the legs that we need to, it can be any colour, but I generally I like to keep them brown, sort of quite grounded. Again, that's personal preference. So we can stencil those in. There we are. And I've actually added a lot more of the brown, so they're quite distinguishable from the branches from earlier on. So now we're on stencil 6. There's quite a lot of stencils in this set, but it's quite fun to see the whole thing come together. So now I can keep the brown stencil brush actually and use the tree bark still, just to add this extra detail around the background bough that they're sitting on. Again, don't necessarily need to go too heavy on the brown with this. So I'll get all of those areas in. Okay, so now you also see that we have some detailing on the wings. What I want to do is sort of mimic the colours that I've already used on the wings below. So you can see the colours that are popping through the stencil. So I'm starting off with the deep ocean, like the deep blue, through where I can see the blue is sitting. And then I'm just going to finish it off from the other side of these apertures and use the natural turquoise, and I shall do the same in a second on the lighter bird too, because I think that detailing then it just adds a lot of, I don't know, it just shows that you're looking at what you're doing. So on this side it's slightly pinkier, so I think what I might do, what did I do? I might go the dusky pink actually. Go quite heavy on the dusky pink into the wing. I think the rhubarb jam will be too much. Yeah, the dusky pink is working just perfectly. So I'll just show you that in a second. I'm picking up a little bit of the brown that's going into there, but that, you know what, that doesn't actually worry me too much at all. So we have some detailing on the face here, and I've used detailing on the face, and we also have the beaks here. So I've used the anthracite for this. So I'm just taking a small stencil brush. I know that there's ink on there already, so I don't need to pick any more up. I don't need to go too dark on the beaks specifically, because there will be another detail added with another stencil a little bit later on, so we don't want to make them too dark that detail won't show. But it gives them a personality now, doesn't it? Now you've taken that stencil away, and you can see how here the tonal blending on the wings really works nicely too. So now we have stencil number 7, and we can start detailing the blossom. So this is where you can afford to pick up a little bit more ink and start working that into the blossom areas. So I'm blotting off a lot of the ink, and then on these areas actually I'm just going into the middle of the stencil and sort of stippling it. It's not something I do very often, but it gives you a slightly different effect, and it's quite nice to do on flowers, particularly when you have a lot of them like this, and you would perhaps want a slightly different look to what you've created before. So it is just worth maybe even just on one of the layers, when you know you've got perhaps 2 or 3 layers to build this blossom, just try stippling, just sort of bouncing the brush. It gives you a little bit more texture. So when I take that away, you can see it sort of diffuses the ink there. It looks so pretty. So we have stencil number 8. We have more detailing on the bird and the leaves. So just as I did before, I am going to concentrate and put this detailing on with the colour that I can see underneath. So here on the tail we have the blue at the top and the turquoise at the bottom. So I am going to follow that. I just really like the effect that it gives, and I think it really shows the attention to detail. But equally, it can work if you do a contrasting colour as well. It all depends on your personal preference and your colour scheme. So I'm going to go really lightly into these facial details there. Make sure that I add the turquoise detailing here also. Perhaps just a little bit at the top there. I don't think that necessarily needs it. And you'll see that we do have the beaks here, tiny little detail, but I'm going to come in really heavy with the anthracite there, and that should give a really nice effect on the beaks, like almost like they've got a shine. And just really, am I going to do that colour? Really gently in the top of his head and along the face, really gently with the anthracite. I don't want it to be overpowering. So that is all I'm going to do for him there. And then the rest of the details on him, I am going to follow the colour that is sitting underneath. So I'm going to do some of these areas in yellow. Let's see. I'm going really bold down. Yeah, have you noticed the past couple of weeks I've been quite brave with my colour, haven't I? It's not like me at all, but oh look, and it's even made the sun come out outside. But Lisa's colour is just so lovely that there's so many there to use. There's time and a place for everything, and I can't say that I won't go subtle again very soon. Actually, I will be going subtle on the background. There we go. So my style is never too far away. It's interesting how we all stencil, really, isn't it? How we all perceived colour and what we're all comfortable using actually. I mean, there's certain colours that I just really struggle to stencil with, and you will see me avoid them if I possibly can. Red for me only ever comes out at Christmas, and even then I have to be quite brave. Okay, so there's a couple of tiny details left on the blossom here. I'm just going to come in with the rhubarb jam. And also, I mustn't forget the detail coming into the leaves here. So I'm going to come in with the Margerita. Really quite heavy. Again, that tonal look, specific, you know, particularly for leaves, I think works just so well. If I was doing this for autumn, then I'd perhaps do this and then add a little tip of brown at the base of these, or the darker woodland moss, which again I had to be very brave and not reach for that for the leaves today. So I'm trying something different. So we've got all that detail on now, and that really changes the look on the bird. And although these areas are quite bold here, they are very tonal with the colour that it's sitting underneath. So we have two more stencils left for the bird actually. So we have their eyes. So we have this one initially. So I'm going to just very light dusting of anthracite into there. Now, this second one is the little pinprick for the eyes here. I usually use anthracite, but I thought maybe this time I would use white, which does mean I have to just clean that off there. Make sure that's perfectly dry before we put that on the thing. So I'm just going to see if the white works on this. So I've got the opaque white stencil brush. I'll just get my ink out there. Actually, maybe I need to use a smaller brush. That will do the job, I think. So I want to pick up quite a lot of the white. It's a very tiny hole. Very tiny. But it should sit quite nicely on the anthracite underneath. Yeah, it's a very tiny hole. Yes, that's worked really nicely actually. You possibly can't see that at this stage. I can lift that up or zoom in on that a little bit later and you can see the difference. So that's the stenciling for the birds. And again, if you didn't want to do both birds so different to each other together, go back and stencil that for a second time. So what we need to do now, of course, is die cut this out. And because I'm using the magnetic mat here, we've got our die, which of course is metal, and that will sit on our magnetic mat without falling, you see. And what that means, it helps you line up that die to your design. Now sometimes, especially if you've used the die a lot, the die can be slightly buckled, or if the desk isn't sitting quite right, it's very easy to knock your die out of place. You know, you've got nothing holding that. So I've just taken it off the magnetic mat, and you can line it up, and then if you just jog that slightly, or you know, it can go out of alignment. But if you do it on your magnetic mat with your die, and this also helps when you're die cutting words as well, which really do have to be sort of precisely placed. It really does help. So now I've done that, and that isn't moving anywhere. And I find that actually really, really helpful, because I am very clumsy. So what that does, I know that that's sitting there quite happily now. That's not moving. So that means I can get my tape and tape that into position, and it's not going anywhere. So now when I lift that, everything's in place, and I can take that to the die cutting machine. So bear with me 2 minutes. 2 ticks. Okay, so that comes out nicely from there. Put that aside for a little bit later. So now we can emboss this. So there's only one way round that we can emboss this, which makes it a little bit easier to line up. And it, as incredibly detailed as this is, it lines up really, really easy. Plate away, so we have that embossed. And now, obviously, this is going to be super enhanced with all the embossed detail over the stenciling that we've just done. How pretty is that? I shall show you that in a second. Okay, so now we can think about separating these, if you can possibly bear it. My natural thought would be to take the blue bird away first and cut up around his tail, around his leg. It's actually quite straightforward, and it's a lot easier to do once it's embossed, because you're given that embossed line there for you to follow. Now you can add as much border around that as you want to, or you can cut right up to the embossing line. It really is up to you, but it is quite straightforward, and there's there's not much detail to cut around. So the die has actually done a lot of the work for you, obviously, giving you all this lovely floral detail. But I'm just cutting around his foot, and in doing that, it's sort of naturally taking you down to this piece of blossom that's sitting underneath him. So we have him sitting there. Now I just want to take away this white space from Mrs. Bird here. So I'm just doing the same thing again, cutting up round past her body, up towards her beak, and just under her chin there. And then you're left with 2 birds. You can do and mount onto any project as you wish. You might just want to use them as they are. What I will say is make sure that both areas with the beaks have a point and they're not squared off. Then it makes it look like they're definitely meant to have been split. Okay. So we have our two birds there. Oh, God, the sun's come out now, isn't it? It's really bleached out that colour. So we have 2 birds now. So now we need to think about our backgrounds. So where is my second piece of cardstock? So I've got my cardstock this time. Now what I'm going to do, I'm not going to stencil the whole of the A5 design for either the bows or the lily of the valley. Actually, so I'm going to do the bows first because it's quicker. I'm going to take the nesting die from the rectangles, and I'm going to take the size larger than the mat that I'm going to cut, if that makes sense. So that's the size of the mat that I will eventually want to cut. So I'm going to go with the die that's a size larger. And I'll show you for why in a second. I'll tape them together. So I'm going to put that one back for now. Now bear in mind we're working on the magnetic mat again, and we do have the magnetic die. This one is slightly bowed, as you will find with a lot of your nesting dies. So I'll just sort of put that back into place. Now this is obviously being held in place because you're working on the magnetic mat, but you can hold that into place with magnetic magnets also. What I'm going to do is create a background, and I'm going to do the blue one first for the bows. And what I'm going to do, I don't want to stencil onto a white background, but I don't want it to be too blue. So I'm using the die as a stencil, and I'm using just a bit of the deep ocean just to stencil a little bit of colour into the background there. Now you can use your magnets obviously to hold the die in place, and then your magnetic mat is also doing some of the work for you also. So I'm just stenciling through that. I am going subtle. You'll see in a second when I move the die out of the way that I have actually put the colour down. Yeah, it's really, really subtle, but it will make all the difference. Now what I will do also is do it a second time, and this would be what I stencil the lily of the valley onto as well. It means that when you add your layering stencils over the top of this, you are only stenciling through the layering stencil the area that you want, because I'll be able to see this blue rectangle underneath. Now there's different ways of doing this, of course. This way works really well. Equally, you could cut a piece of blue cardstock, or you can colour that background afterwards. So I've done that, and I'm using the blooming bows, which only has 2 stencils. Now this time round I want the bows to be lengthways, so I'm going to just change the orientation of the card a little bit. So I've just moved my, oh, I don't need it that way, I need it that way. So I want the card to be landscape. So I'm going to add the bows that way. Am I going to do it that way? No. Okay. Right, so now what I'm thinking out loud now. I can't fit this onto the pegs and cover the area that I want to. So I'm going to position the area of the stencil over the blue area that I want to cover. I'm going to use my magnets to keep the stencil in place. I'm going to get my pencil, and I'm just going to draw into the holes here, because that's when I know that I'll be able to realign the next stencil. So now I can come in with a deep ocean brush again, pick up a little bit more ink. I'm not going too bad. I don't want this to be too bold to say I really want him to be the first and foremost thing you see on the card, but the background. I didn't disappear for too long. We're back again. So second stencil coming in now. So we can get the detail of the bows on top. I've lined up the holes to what I drew earlier on. The magnet's keeping everything in place. And I can just add that extra layer and the detail on top of the bows there. Again, I'm just keeping this really, really subtle. And just as a little extra detail, just come in with a little bit of the natural turquoise and just go into the centre of the bows. I'm not doing the whole bow, but if I just go into the centre of the bows, it just gives a little diffused pop of colour. It'll be really, really subtle. Really, really subtle. Okay, and I'll just spread out the rest of the ink that we have there. So when I take that away, just how, oh, we're all a bit blurred. Should come back in focus. Yes, there we are. So now we can see that we have a really subtle background. It's sort of really, really soft. It's really, really pretty. So now I can take the smaller size die that I want my layer to be on the card, and I'll be able to die cut that out, and the bows are in the right sort of orientation. So there we are. I've die cut the bows out of that, and you can see now that we've got that random look there. What we initially stenciled was enough to cover the map that we needed. Now I'm very conscious of time here. I'm going to overrun slightly, but I'd be able to make up this card. Now it's entirely up to you whether you want to sit and watch me stencil the Lily of the Valley, or I can do that and afterwards and sort of add a little extra bit onto the video and just show you the outcome. So it's entirely up to you. But what I'm going to do now, I'm going to map this onto a piece of Lisa's satin card. Again, it is that blue. You can see when I turn that to the colour, and it just coordinates perfectly with the deep ocean colour that we've been using. So I can glue that onto the mat. The frame, I've already added the 3D foam. So I can take the backing off of there. Now, where are we? Now I shall go with you entirely on whether you want me to stay and finish off the Lily of the Valley for you. There we are. Come on again. Is everybody still with me? Can't tell. So I'm going to layer the frame there, so that gives us a nice 3D element. Oh, there we are. Valerie's there. You don't mind staying? It's entirely up to you. And then we can lay our bird onto the top here. Now he does overlap a little bit. I don't mind that too much in particularly. What I will do, I'm going to stick him on first, and then add the glue to the frame also to make sure we don't miss. So we can glue him onto there. Again, this is a slightly different way round to there, so make it look a little bit different. And then because we've got an overlap there, which we don't want on the bottom of the card because that will stop it standing nicely, we can just trim that off the bottom like so. So that sits really nicely on there. And then we can get our sentiment. So I'm using the Fabulous fonts, and we can put anything on here, I think, can't we? So I'm going to use this one, Celebrate Your Birthday, same as I did before. So I'm going to put this on an acrylic block. You can obviously use a stamping platform. So I'm going to use a nice black ink that up. And I'm going to stamp that straight onto there. Now you could of course stamp that onto a piece of white card, blue card, and mount that, die cut it and then mount it on there. So that's our first card finished there. And the birds does look quite different, don't they? One of your favourite sentiment stamps. Yeah, it's lovely, isn't it? I think it's nice because you get so many different fonts. So, what was the consensus? Do I stay? Let's do it. Okay, come on. Let's do it. Let's go. I shall do some speedy stenciling. Let's see if I can do stenciling at speed. Okay, so I have exactly the same background and I'm going to create the Lily of the Valley blue in exactly the same way. So I'm going to put that into place. Now this background design for the Lily of the Valley has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 stencils. So it's really detailed. It's really unusual for a background collection, but super pretty actually. It was the first time I'd used this. So I'm going to want to make sure that my stencil design is going to fit in the area, tiny little area that I stenciled already. And I can see through the stencil that it does. So I'm going to get my cardstock straight. Obviously it's sitting on the pegs, which is preferable. So I'm going to come in with this detail with the painted eggshell to start with. So it's going to take on like a grey sort of hue. It's almost oriental by the time I finish this. It's really, really pretty. So now, because I know the area that I want to stencil, it means that I don't have to cover the whole 5x7 design, which can speed things up a little bit. Now you can't see that, but that is very subtle. So I'm going to come in with stencil number 2 again with the painted eggshell. I'm only adding a little bit of ink because I really don't want this to be too bold sitting behind this bird here, because there's a lot going on. As beautiful as it is, it really doesn't need too much extra detail to distract from what we've already done. So we've got the grey sitting on top of the blue, which is so pretty, and I think I will revisit that and just use this colour scheme for a completely different card. It's so lovely. So now we have the rhubarb jam, and I'm just going to use the ink that's already on the brush and on the stencil there. Because again, this first layer I want to be really, really subtle. What I do need to do, actually, is to get myself a larger stencil brush for rhubarb jam. I don't have one, so that might mean I might have to go shopping. That's a good excuse, isn't it? So a really subtle layer, and you can see now how this is going to build. And you can see how, let me just bring in this for you so you can see it a little bit more. I shall tell you the colours as we go. Look how pretty that is. Isn't that gorgeous? Okay, so stencil number 4. Very similar design again. Pick up a little bit more ink. And so I'm going a little bit darker, but not too much darker. It really is all about using like that secondary ink and just building up those layers so incredibly slowly. For this particular layer, now you can obviously stencil this, and I will do this perhaps sometime in the future on another live, where I will make this the main focus and really do this design justice by using deeper colours. But you can see just how this is building, and occasionally I've gone a little bit heavier which I think is just perfect. It looks to me like an old vintage piece of fabric. Now what I'm going to do here, because there's less detail than some of the smaller flowers, what I'm going to do, I've picked up quite a lot of ink, I've put it on the stencil, and I'm just going to one swipe into the flowers. What that's going to do is going to give quite an intense bit of colour, but it's going to show the stencil brush. It's going to give you a hint of what that design is, but I'm not filling in the whole aperture entirely. Does that make sense? And you can see that I'm just going to the base of one of, like, where the flowers are, and just swiping. It's a very different way to what I would normally stencil. But when I pull the stencil away in a second, you'll see how effective it is. It won't be for everybody, and it won't be something that you will do every time you use this design, but I think in this particular case it really works. I'll just make sure I've got all the areas. So when I pull that away, to me it's just looking really vintagey. To me it really suits this design, and you can see just areas here where you can just see the brush strokes, and I think that is just really, really pretty. And I shall do the same again on this one. We say there's a lot less detail on here, and it means you can have a real pop of colour, but because it's almost brush stroking, you can see the colour behind it. I don't know, I just think it's really interesting. It's just a different way to use the stencil. So make sure I have all of those there. Okay, so take that away. And it just makes, because I really want this to sort of mix into the background, I think that sort of technique works so well. So let me just show you that. There you go. And that is painted eggshell and rhubarb jam. That is the only two colours that I've used on there, in varying amounts of pressure on the brush. Which, say, for this particular case, because it is so busy, it gives you like almost that cherry blossom design in the background. Now I need to find the so I need to die cut this again, so you can pick out sort of the favourite part of your design there. You've got a little bit of wiggle room to decide. And actually, now I've die cut it, it sort of really comes into its own. So it might not be for everyone. It might not be everyone's cup of tea, but I think that is just really pretty. There's a bit too much shadow on there. Let's just turn. Oh, there you go. You can really see the detail there. But it's a beautiful stencil set, so it's one that you can really go to town on, and really highlight the detail even more. So I will do that in a future live, because it's there's so much scope with the it's the Lily of the Valley mini blooms, it's called. So what I will do, I won't stick all this together now. So I've basically used the same nesting rectangles to cut myself a couple of layers. I've got textured pink cardstock, and I have the satin shimmer card underneath, so we can have that sitting on there, and our bird can sit on the corner like so. Now obviously you will need to trim this down again, so if I just hold all this into place, and I can just trim the bottom of that blossom there. Now you could trim this side as well, or if you have an envelope big enough, it might be quite nice just to leave that as it is. Now I'm just bringing this one that I've already done, and you'll be able to see the difference as to how we put over our vellum over the top. So all I done was just cut myself a piece of vellum the same size as the mat here. I got the embossing folder for the Lily of the Valley. And I lined up what I've stenciled into the folder. Now, it's not as tricky as it seems. So if you just perhaps bear in mind where the area that you stenciled on your stencils here, and that will just lead you and give you a good indication as to how to start to line that up on your embossing folder and your stenciled area. So I have that area there like that. So that's the corresponding design. Yes, it's sitting wonky on the inside, but that doesn't matter. You'd never know. Now, I don't want to emboss that piece, but what I do want to emboss is the vellum. So sitting the folder onto the desk, that stenciled layer is sitting nicely on the thing. So I'm on the base of the embossing folder. So I'm going to, it's going to lean against the ink. Let me just put the ink lids on there because I will get myself into a pickle. There we are. So I'm going to line up the vellum on the stenciled layer, close that down again. Now, I wouldn't necessarily suggest putting 2 layers of cardstock through the embossing folder. You may be able to get away with it because you're using vellum, but I'm holding the 2 pieces together and just opening it slightly and just catching the vellum on the top layer and holding that. Then I can allow this to fall out. You see, I'm still holding the vellum. This is loose, so now I can grab that, and you know that I'm going to emboss the vellum in exactly the same area that I've stenciled here. So hopefully that makes sense. I say it's not essential you do it this way, but I'll just show you the process that I went through. It may be something that you want to try. But the 2 designs now correspond to each other. This would look lovely equally, just to go on like that also. So I'm giving you so many different possibilities here. It's really what you've got to hand and what you like the look of. So we have 3 different looks really. So we can have the vellum straight onto the cardstock at the back. So you can have the stencil layer with the bird sitting over the top, or you can add the vellum over the top and soften the colour behind. Now you can see that the vellum takes on just a really soft colouring, because I find it easier to add the colour to cardstock than I do to vellum. Not to say you can't stencil on vellum, you absolutely can, but it's entirely up to you. So there's so many different ways to do that. So if I leave that like that, you've got the 2 different options, and then obviously we have the counterpart that come in, the other half of our Feathered Friend stencil. And the other version that was gone this way. So there's 4 different ways of doing that there. Quite a lot of techniques there. So thanks so much for sticking with me. It will be ideal for you to watch back and see how to do this and sort of take your time in re-watching that. So yeah, there's lots of different ideas there. And it's a really different way to use your Feathered Friend stencil as well. Yeah, it's quite oriental, isn't it, Evelyn? That was exactly what I thought, which I'm sure if I played around with, you can create another fabulous card like that also. So we have our sentiments that we have sitting on here also. Happy birthday. These are stamped with Lisa's pigment ink in the sugar candy, and the colour is a perfect match, if you were wondering also. And that's a detail that I'll add up onto the slide for you at the end. So apologies on the zoom in there, I do need to get used to that a little bit more. But what I'll do, I'll put up the details. So for those who didn't see the slides at the beginning, I can add them there for you. So, well, thank you, Rose. It's nice to have you here. It's nice to see new names come and join me occasionally. So I'm here every Tuesday and every other Thursday. I share Thursdays with Dawn. So Dawn is with you this Thursday. It was lovely to have your company here today. So thanks so much. It's a bit of an extended version today, wasn't it? But now you can rewatch that back in your own time. And if you just do decide to give it a go, then we'd love to see the results in the group also. So let me just bring in those colours there. There we are. So I shall go back and read all of your comments now. You're still up in lights. Yes, you are, Connie. I don't know how you got there, but it's a lovely comment, and it's one that should be up in lights. So thank you very much. Look, there we are. It's gone. I'm still getting used to the interface screen there. So I've had enough of your time this afternoon, so I won't keep you any longer. Thanks so much for joining me. Thanks so much for being patient and sticking with me. I really enjoyed that actually this afternoon. Hope you did too. And I shall see you all again next week. So take care, everyone.